Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to probably think about the 180th almost consecutive monthly luncheon since 1996 that the DC Environmental Network, long before I even became part of this organization, hosted here. And I know some of you guys. Yeah, you were probably there near.
I think I've been to 3 different Friends of the Earth offices for these.
Yeah, over the years.
I guess I'm dating myself a little bit.
But I'm very excited, and I'm always very excited to reuse these name tags, because this is the name tag I think I had when Rick was first appointed to the Public Service Commission. And at the time, the Friends of the Earth and the DC Sierra Club had endorsed Rick to become to be appointed as a commissioner under then Williams, Mayor Williams. Mm-hmm. And we had a long history of working with Rick because he led a really magnificent campaign in Rock Creek Park, trying to convince the authorities to keep Beach Drive open 7 days a week. And of course, we have that
open for recreation.
Open for recreation 7 days a week. Yes, it's certainly open for the cars.
Yeah, that's the problem.
In fact, I think the first time I met Rick was at a very impressive rally in Rock Creek Park with a bunch of mothers with their strollers marching to keep the Beach Drive open. And actually, that's kind of got me started here in D.C., was coming to your event, talking to Jim Doherty and Phil Mendelson. And ultimately, then I started working for Phil as his chief of staff, was his campaign manager, and then became his chief of staff, and then was invited to come over and become the director of the D.C. Environmental Network. So Rick played a huge role in that. And I'm a big fan of his. The DC Environmental Network supports his candidacy to be. I mean, we're hoping that the current mayor will pick him to be a commissioner for another term. And we're particularly excited because he's outlined some very specific proposals that he's going to talk a little bit about. But maybe at this point, why don't you just maybe give a little bit more information about yourself and then outline what you're going to talk about and go for it.
Okay. Well, it's nice to see all of you. I see a lot of familiar faces here and a few new faces too. As Chris said, I've been involved with DCEN for a long time, wearing various and sundry different hats. And at least for almost 8 years now, it's been in my role as a commissioner on the Public Service Commission. For those who aren't familiar with the PSC, it's the regulatory agency for the private utilities in the District of Columbia. It's the same kind of commission that exists in all 50 states. We have to regulate utilities too, so we have a Public Service Commission. We regulate electric, gas, and telephone service. We don't regulate water. It's only the private companies that we regulate. We set rates and policies. We enforce quality of service standards. We're a quasi-judicial agency. We operate a lot like a court of law. We have witnesses that are sworn in, who are cross-examined. We make a decision based on an evidentiary record. It's subject to due process, and we issue an order, which is the way we make decisions. There are 3 commissioners on the PSC. We each have a 4-year term. So every year, about the middle of the year, usually one of the commissioners' terms is up, and this is my year. The other 2 commissioners, by the way, some of you probably know Betty Ann Kane or know of her. Betty Ann was a member of the DC Council for many years and also the school board, and she's also headed up other agencies in the district. And she's our chairman. And the other commissioner is Lori Murphy Lee, who joined the commission about 2 years ago, appointed by Adrian Fenty. We have a staff of about 70 people. And we work closely with other agencies, some of whom most of whom I see are here, especially since Karen came in. Karen's with the Office of the People's Council, which represents consumers, ratepayers, before the Commission. We also work closely with DDOE, the District Department of the Environment. Cecily is here. And do you have a colleague here too, or is it just you?
Dan Berry here.
Oh, okay.
Climate change.
All right.
And Jessica Daniels, who's in here.
Right. I saw the familiar faces, but I wasn't sure exactly who you were, so thank you. And so both of those agencies often appear before the Commission, and of course we work with them closely. Our role at the Commission is primarily as economic regulators, although much of what we do affects the environment and the use of natural resources. We are involved in policies toward energy efficiency and renewables. The way we price electricity, you can really send important incentives to consumers about how they use their utility services, and I'll get into that a little bit more. You can provide an incentive to either waste energy, which is what a lot of utilities used to promote for many years, or to conserve energy, which is what we're trying to do now. Our role with regard to energy efficiency and renewables was changed substantially a few years ago by the enactment of the Clean and Affordable Energy Act, and that put more of the emphasis over at DDOE, particularly with the creation of the Sustainable Energy Utility. And I don't know, have you had a presentation about the SEU yet?
Oh, we've done about 5 or 10.
Okay.
We were one of the original developers.
So I don't think
of
I
that.
need to tell you what the
We
SEU,
convened
what
40
the SEU
meetings
is.
with different people to try to figure out what the environmental community wanted to see in the bill.
Right.
Here.
So anyway, that's
Yes.
that's a detailed issue we can't get into a lot of detail on, but just a little bit about my background. I've had a long career in energy policy and utility regulation going back a little over 40 years now. I started out as an environmental and consumer advocate for 15 years. I actually came to Washington to work for a group called Environmental Action. And then I spent 5 years on the staff of the Public Service Commission. And then I spent 12 years at US EPA before I came back to the commission as a commissioner in 2003. And actually at EPA, I served as a liaison to the state commissions, basically helping EPA stay in touch with what was going on in the regulatory community, which they continue to do. I was nominated to the PSC, as Chris mentioned, by Mayor Tony Williams, and then I was renominated in 2007 by Adrian Fenty, and I've asked Mayor Gray to reappoint me, and hopefully a decision will be forthcoming soon. Chris suggested that I talk a little bit about global warming. I usually use the term climate change, but they're somewhat interchangeable. And it's indeed a passion of mine, has been for many, many years. About 40% of all the carbon dioxide in the U.S. comes from power generation. So that is definitely the big fish when you talk about climate change in this country. And it's probably even higher than that in this part of the country. Another 14%, people may not realize that, comes from the consumption of natural gas. So when you add those two together, you got more than half of all the CO2 that basically is something that state utility commissions have some say about it, and we take that very seriously. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of good news about climate, and I don't think I need to tell you that. Ultimately, controlling carbon emissions is going to require national and international solutions. We are part of a power grid in the district that covers more than 40 states and several Canadian provinces. The power flows freely through all those transmission lines, and we are in a lot of ways sort of at the end of the wire and don't have a lot of control over what happens. The other thing is that we have almost no generation inside the district. We currently import at least 98% of our electricity from outside, and the last 2 central power plants that are operating within the district are slated to close by the middle of next year. And after that, we'll be importing virtually 100%, except for a little bit of cogeneration and whatever solar generation or other types of generation people might have behind the meter in their homes or businesses. So that is one way that we can actually make a difference by producing more homegrown energy. But we don't have a lot of control over what happens on the grid. In the past few years, I'm proud to say there is a lot that state regulators have done on climate. I was the first chair of the Climate Task Force for our national association called NARUC, which stands for National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. Remember that for the quiz at the end. And during that 3 years that I served as chair of the Climate Task Force, NARUC came out in favor of putting a price on carbon, which I thought was quite remarkable. I thought I would never see that. But it was really a recognition that we need to just get on with it because this uncertainty is just driving everybody crazy. And by and large, most of the power industry has come out in favor of pricing carbon, and yet there's still obviously a long way to go politically. Since that time, Congress obviously has taken climate change off the table, at least for a while. We've been hopeful for some time that the district might have an opportunity to join a regional carbon trading market. Some of you may be familiar with RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which was organized by 10 northeastern states. Unfortunately, when they organized it, the invitations went to all the governors. And that is the only reason we didn't get invited to join, because we don't have a governor. I have been working to rectify that ever since, with help from George Hawkins when he was at DDOE, and we still have not ever received an invitation to join RGGI, unfortunately. They know that we would be happy to join. The problem is that we don't have a lot of emissions to control. We just have a big load, and that means they would have to share those emissions allowances farther than they do now. And for them that would be a liability, as much as it's, we think, very unfair. There are still things we can do to reduce carbon emissions in the district. We have a very aggressive renewables portfolio standard, RPS, which requires that 20% of our electricity come from renewables by 2020. That was upgraded a couple of years ago. And there's, of course, a carve-out for solar, and I know that you all have talked about that, and that may be increasing very soon. We have the new Sustainable Energy Utility, which is just getting off the ground, which has some very aggressive goals and a huge potential, and if we can in any way replicate what has been done in Efficiency Vermont by the folks that we hired to do it here from the Vermont Energy Investment Corp, I think we're going to see some very impressive results. Another thing we can do is encourage retirement of some of the old coal-fired power plants that are still providing power for the district. The single most important one is called the Potomac River Generating Station. It happens to be in Virginia, right near National Airport in Alexandria. People think of it as the Mirant plant, but Mirant doesn't exist anymore. They've been swallowed by a company called GenOn, and the plant is about 60 years old. It is still burning coal inside the Beltway, generating electricity, not for Virginia. It's a former Pepco plant that's hardwired into the distribution system of the district and to some extent Maryland. But it has always in the past been the primary source of electricity for downtown DC. Buildings like this one and the one I work in, and most of the federal facilities. And in 2005, when what was then Mirant was playing chicken with the Virginia authorities to try to get them to back off on insisting on more pollution controls, they announced that they were going to shut that plant down within 2 days. And we actually went to the federal government, asked Department of Energy to use a little-known provision of the Energy Policy Act to order them to keep that plant running at least until we could get a transmission line built to bypass that plant. Pepco already had the plan in its back pocket. They got it done within less than 2 years, and we withdrew the request at that point. And at least based on the information we had at the time, we now are able to operate our system reliably without needing to have that plant, the Potomac River plant, in operation. And I know there are efforts by Sierra Club and others to try to get that plant retired. And it's long been an object of the residents of Alexandria who see it as a real eyesore. there are all these condos surrounding it now. Honestly, it's not a very good place for an old coal-fired power plant. So I'm hopeful that as we explore some of the potential of demand-side options, particularly demand response to shave peak, if we can shave our peaks in the district, and that means we've got to get the DC government and the federal government involved, we can reduce the need for that plant, and in fact, it may become uneconomical for them to continue running it, or at least run it a lot less than they are. I want to talk a little bit about what I think is one of the most promising initiatives that's going on in the district, and that involves the smart grid. The district is on the cutting edge on implementation of smart grid technologies. We completed an award-winning pilot called PowerSense DC, which I'll talk about in a minute. We are among the first jurisdictions in the country, or will be, to have smart meters for every customer. Pepco plans to have everyone with a smart meter in the district by the end of this year. That's thanks to $44 million in federal grant money from the stimulus funds, which paid for half the cost of the smart meter installation, and action by the DC Council as well as the Commission to make it possible for Pepco to go ahead with the deployment subject to the Council action. And the deployment involves smart meters, an advanced communication system, a more advanced billing system. The rollout of the smart meters began last fall, and as I mentioned, completion is scheduled for the end of this year. There's a customer education and engagement program being developed by a working group that includes Pepco, the Commission staff, Office of People's Council, and a number of other organizations, and it's open to all. So if you have questions about that, let me know. In fact, I should pass out this fact sheet before I forget. We probably don't need all of them, but there you go. It's a fact sheet on our smart grid program in the district. There will be, we anticipate significant operational benefits from the smart meters, reduced meter reading costs, much more efficient outage management. If any of you have had problems with your power going out like I have, you have to call Pepco to tell them your power is out or they won't know. Well, a smart meter will ping Pepco immediately when your power goes out. And not only that, they'll be able to zero in, figure out exactly where the problem is, dispatch their crews much more efficiently. And there's other kinds of technology they're installing at the same time called automatic reclosers. And together, these technologies will, I won't say it will eliminate outages, but it will make them much easier to deal with. Pepco is in the process of replacing 280,000 meters, so it is an enormous undertaking. One of the things that we'll be able to do with smart metering, they will be able to look at which customers are using power when, and which is really important because right now you get your bill probably once a month, and you get a total for how much electricity you used during the month. You don't know whether you used it on the weekends or weekdays, evenings, daytime, and so on. With the advanced metering, it will be able to tell you exactly when you used it, and it will also be possible to distinguish times when power is extremely valuable versus when it's less expensive. And that makes it possible to offer rebates to customers who are able to reduce their load at times when that power is particularly valuable and might actually be able to alleviate some of the stress on the grid and help to bring down the price spikes, which is where the generators make most of their money and they get it from us. So there's tremendous opportunities to basically empower customers to control the way they use energy and to lower their bills. One of the things that we could do, for example, is help customers to cut their usage at times of the peak when certain dirty power plants are running. In other words, you could go into direct competition with the Potomac River Power Plant by reducing your load during the peak period. and I think that's a real opportunity for folks that are interested in closing, retiring that plant or any other one. Long term, there are opportunities for smart appliances which are starting to come on the market. Smart appliances can actually talk to your meter. Your meter will tell the appliance what the price is at a given time, and the appliance can decide, should I operate now or should I operate later? And then there are things like plug-in electric vehicles. You could offer favorable rates to make it possible to operate in a plug-in vehicle at far less than the cost of gasoline. And not only that, a plug-in vehicle is not just a vehicle to take you around town. It's a fabulous storage device. That battery, the people who run the grid just drool at the thought of having thousands of those batteries hooked up to their grid that they can use for storage. It can be used to firm wind power because, of course, wind power is intermittent. Same with solar. And then when it comes to solar, the idea of having, I don't know if any of you have solar PV on your roofs. I don't, so I'm not going to put my hand up, but I certainly know a lot of people who do. Right now, you can use our net metering policy. You get full credit, full retail price for any excess power that goes back to the grid. In effect, your meter is running backwards, and you're selling power to Pepco when you're generating more than the load in your home. If with smart metering, it makes it possible to distinguish when you generate that power. Power generated when it's sunny and it's hot and it's humid is much more valuable. And with what we call smart pricing or dynamic pricing, we will actually be able to give customers credit for when they generate that power. And in fact, we have set our net metering rules, and I believe we're the first jurisdiction in the country to do this, where the credit that you get is not measured in kilowatt hours, which don't distinguish the time factor, but it's measured in dollars and cents. It's translated based on when you generate it. So once we have dynamic pricing in place, you'll get a much higher value for generating from solar during those peak periods. So there's just huge potential from dynamic pricing. I want to say a little bit about the pilot that we did called PowerSense DC. Was anybody here a participant in it? We had about 900 participants. And the pilot was undertaken in 2008 and 2009 to see how residential customers would respond to new kinds of price signals from smart meters. We tested 3 different pricing methods in order to encourage customers to curtail usage during peak periods when wholesale market power prices are particularly high. And the participants were rewarded with either a rebate or a price differential when they shift their load away from the high price periods. And the result was that customers just loved it. And it really defied the sort of popular notion that most customers don't want to be bothered with having prices that vary from one time of day to another. These are customers who tried it. All types of residential customers responded and reduced their peaks. Not just middle and upper income customers, low income customers did as well at almost the same rate. Nearly all the participants saved money. The participants, many participants used an enabling technology. We gave them free smart thermostats to anybody who had central air conditioning so that they could have their smart thermostat talk to the meter, know what the price is, and whenever the price gets high, they could just dial back the air conditioning a little bit, enough that they wouldn't even notice it, and save a whole bunch of money. And it was basically a set it and forget it type arrangement. And the participants really felt empowered by the ability to control their utility bills and save energy and money. We did a participant survey when the program was over, and we said, if you had the choice, would you rather go back to Pepco's flat rates, or would you like to have smart rates? And the customers said, we like smart rates. It was by a margin of 14-1. So we really believe that there is a tremendous potential here for dynamic pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. What's the the rollout of it? I mean, once the installations are complete, what's the rollout of the software? What's the timeline for that? Of the operational software?
We don't really have a timeline yet. Pepco is supposed to have all the meters in place by the end of the year, but there's going to be a shakedown period for the communication system, the billing system, and so on. Their plan is to have some dynamic pricing in place for some customers beginning, I think, sometime in the first part of 2012. And it does depend to some extent on commission decisions. We have a proposal from Pepco before us right now it's just an initial tariff proposal that involves a critical peak rebate as the default, and that hasn't been ruled on yet. So I can't really give you any dates at this point. Let me take one more question, and then I want to move on, but then we'll have time for a lot of Q&A.
Okay.
Do you want to ask now?
Oh,
Or-
well, I've heard some stories from other districts where when people got their smart meter, their electricity bill skyrocketed like factor 5 or more.
Okay, let's come back to that
Okay.
one. That's a pretty
a big
loaded question.
Yeah.
And yes, I've heard about that too. What I wanted to do, if I can, is do a little bit of a commercial. I think Chris sort of tipped everybody off that I am kind of in campaign mode right now, seeking another term on the commission, and so I'm passing out some materials that summarize some of my experience on the commission and some of my goals. One of them is more general, and the other is focused on just energy issues that I think would be more appropriate for this group. So I thought I'd bring that one along as well. As of today, I've received 25 organizational endorsements. It's a mix of advocacy groups, a number of neighborhood groups from around the city, associations and businesses. Examples include the Sierra Club's DC chapter, Politics and Pros Climate Action Program, MDVCIA, which is the local Solar Energy Industry Association affiliate, and several other solar organizations, and a number of energy efficiency groups. My current term does expire June 30, into next month, and I'm hopeful that Mayor Gray will make a decision soon. It is possible to be extended for up to 180 days if necessary. So certainly I would welcome support from organizations, businesses, others. I have not asked utilities for an endorsement or DC agencies. That's probably a little not quite appropriate, but I certainly welcome support from anyone else. I know some of you have already been very supportive. I do, by the way, have this is almost like a petition. Some individuals have asked what they could do to help, and I didn't want to flood the mayor with individual letters, so I'm just maintaining kind of a list that I can show to either the mayor or council members of people that support me. And so I'll pass this around. If you live in the district, just put your name down in your ward. You can put your email on if you want, and that way I can let you know what happens. Anyway.
What I like is he's not asking for campaign contributions.
Absolutely not. I have no campaign budget. This is all being done out of the PC at home. So, but anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and I'd be happy to answer questions. And I guess I should start with Judy here.
Okay.
You know what I was thinking
Well,
we might do?
well,
Just,
I'd like to
I'm sorry,
sign it
Judy,
again.
just
Yeah.
1 second. I was thinking maybe, since this is a nice intimate group, that we just quickly go around so people kind of know who they are. I'm Chris Weiss. I'm the director of the DC Environmental Network. We just go around real quickly.
Sure, I'm Philip Ellis. I'm organizer for the Sierra Club, organizing against the film for Brooklyn.
I'm Dan Barry. I work at DDOE doing climate policy for the district.
And you used to work here at Friends of the Earth.
That is correct.
Hi, I'm Megan Pitts. I'm currently a fellow, finishing up a fellowship at Greenpeace USA, and I've been working on Potomac River Fulton.
I used to work at Greenpeace.
Small world. Nice to meet you.
Let's keep adding on down the road.
Cecily Bell with the DDOE Air Quality.
Jessica Daniels with DBOE
Francis Drunken with the Office of the People's Council in their Consumer Services Division.
I'm Patrick DeLeon from OAR. I have a little bit of a different reason for being here. But we work with youth on probation, and we have a work crew of youth doing community service projects, and we're applying to the EPA to do a project with the DC Environmental Network, doing kind of an environmental journalism piece with youth on probation.
Joanna Kendick, probably closest to the involved citizens. I am active with Capitol Hill Energy Co-op, DC Sun, which is kind of an evolving organization. I'm here to listen, get involved.
My name is Jeffrey King. I work for the Council of Governments, supporting both, I guess you'd say, the Regional Air Quality Committee, which does the SIP work, the State Implementation Plan work for the tri-state region and our metro non-attainment areas, working a lot with Cecily, and also the Climate, Energy, Environment Policy Committee, which is our actually now one of our largest policy committees at COG, working on energy and climate.
I'm Sunil Kumar, also work with Metropolitan Resident Council Development at JFK from Philly, and also working in quality climate change issues.
I'm Paul Walker with Global Green USA. I run the Washington office of Global Green USA, which is an environmental NGO headquartered in Santa Monica, California, with the U.S. national affiliate of Mikhail Gorbachev's Green Cross International, so the Environmental Red Cross. And we do a whole range of environmental work. The program here I manage is called Security and Sustainability. We've done a lot of work in green building, green schools. We have one of the biggest projects in reconstructing New Orleans, in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, so most of our work is focused on lower income families. And we work internationally all across the globe with 33 national affiliates on every continent in the world.
And they are the DC Environmental Network's fiscal agent.
Yeah, we work very closely with Chris Weiss and the DC Environmental Network, and we've also been a big promoter of solar. We have if you look on our website, we have a solar report card that rates countries, actually, so it's a little bit larger than the district, but rates countries on their federal support of solar energy. In the United States, I think, got a grade of something like C-. I think where a number of other countries like Germany and Spain have received B+ or A-, I think, in their support and promotion and development of solar energy.
My name's Judy Kosovich, and mostly when I've interacted with DC government, it's been through Capital Sun Group, which is a solar installer. I used to work at the U.S. Department of Energy, and some years before that, EPA. And I found energy policy at the U.S. Department of Energy very frustrating, so I'm now trying to pay my debt to society for having worked there. So when issues cross my path, I try and form an opinion, and if I think there's something I can do to make it better, then I jump in and then try and use whatever networks I develop. So I was kind of neutral on smart meters until just recently, when I learned of some things from Chris Turner, who walked in a few minutes ago, that made me. And I also feel like Pepco did a bait and switch with the solar community, because when they first talked about, we've got these smart meters and it's going to be really good for people owning solar systems, and so we can work together, and now it turns out that the smart meters that are installed, as a matter of course, are not solar friendly. You have to get it reprogrammed, and they take their sweet time doing anything to give you credit for your solar system. So anyway, and then some of the other issues that I've learned about it.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
you had the floor whenever I interrupted you initially, so you're going to be able to ask a question directly as soon as we're done, but if we could just finish and go around.
Okay, sorry.
I'm George Nichols. I am currently the Government and Public Affairs Director for the DC Energy Sustainable Energy Utility. So Chris will be coming back later to make a full-blown presentation to this group. And of course, Rick, if it's appropriate, we certainly will endorse you.
Thank you.
Maybe as individuals. Since I'm on your advisory board, that's probably not a good idea.
Yes, Chris.
Hi, I'm
Chris Turner. I live in Tacoma, D.C. I'm vice president of a neighborhood association there, Neighbors Inc. And I'm also a lawyer. I grew up in D.C. and went to Howard for law school and worked for Swanken and Turner, which is a consumer interest law firm.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nikki. I'm from Mongolia. I got my MBA in deal consulting. Also, I'm learning about the smart meter with this law firm.
I'm Jordan Engel. I'm a consultant doing some green building work. And just because Chris mentioned it, I'll say I also grew up in DC.
Brian Gallagher, I'm a consultant. I helped develop the DCSEU Authority RFP.
Thank you for that, and thank you. And so we'll shift to you if you could ask your question. And,
Okay, well-
or if it's once it's informal, more of a discussion, but I want to take advantage of him being here, so let him do most of the talking.
Well, certainly the amount that some people get charged when they get their smart meter is a concern, and so are the solar systems. But actually, my bigger concern is that I've heard that there's been fires and a lot of electronics failing. I mean, thousands of dollars worth of equipment failing, different components within a few days of a smart meter being installed, and it's like, well, that has environmental implications. So people go out and buy a new one, and who's going to pay for that? And how do we know that this isn't a problem for the brand that's being installed? And what kind of quality control system is in place to make sure that we don't really regret this?
Well, first of all, we have Pepco has to get any meter approved before they're allowed to install it for any DC customer, and they did go through the approval process, and the meters were found to be accurate. They have to be within a certain threshold. In fact, smart meters have been shown to generally be more accurate than the conventional analog meters. I mean, the analog meter is basically Thomas Edison vintage technology. That's the same technology Thomas Edison was using in the 1800s to measure electricity, and that's probably what's on your home right now, unless you've gotten a smart meter already. So it's all digital, and it is a different technology. It has communication built into it. The issue of the people's bills soaring, I think you're probably referring to what happened in Bakersfield, California, which really had more to do with timing than anything else. And there were examples of people whose bills soared shortly after the meters were installed. It turns out a lot of people's bills also soared before the meters were installed. And it just so happened that the meter installation coincided with a time of a severe heat wave and a change in the rate design. And those two things together, once there was an investigation that was done, and it was the combination of essentially a heat storm, a long heat wave, and the fact that there was a new tail block put in the rate, which was higher than prices had been before, and people did have their bills double or more, but it wasn't the meter that did it, and the customers who had the original meters were affected just the same. So.
And what about the fires and failing?
The fire, Chris has sent me a bunch of stuff about the fires, and I've asked our staff to look at it. I haven't gotten anything back on it yet. At least what I've seen so far has been anecdotal. What I can say is electricity is dangerous, no matter what kind of meter you have. And thinking of Thomas Edison, when he was trying to sell electricity to people, it was a new idea, and a lot of people were scared to death at the idea of having electricity in their homes. And in fact, there were examples where people burned their houses down by misusing it. Right. And that is possible. It is possible to install things incorrectly. I am not aware of anything that says that smart meters are any more dangerous than the conventional dumb meter, but I think it is possible if you install anything incorrectly that there is a risk of fire and that sort of thing. The one thing that the smart meters have that is different from your conventional analog meter is it has a radio transmitter in it, and that it receives radio signals from the utility. It sends radio signals back to the utility so that it can tell them exactly how much you're using and when. It's all encrypted and encoded and very secure. But there is a radio signal coming out of that. It's about comparable to a wireless router if you have one in your home. It's or maybe a baby monitor, that sort of thing. It's a lot less. It's certainly less than a cell phone. Partly, well, for two reasons. One is you probably don't hold the meter up to your head, and the other is that whereas you might be talking on the cell phone for a while, a smart meter typically operates for less than 1% of the time. It's not like it's running all the time. It's just sending out little pings. So it's like the amount of radio frequency exposure, it's not non-existent, but it's way less than the amount that you get from other common things. Another example is like a microwave oven, or a BlackBerry in your pocket or anything like that. So or a pager. I mean, there are just a lot of common devices like that.
If it turns out that there is a problem, like for a lifetime of electronic equipment, who's going to eat the costs?
Well, I don't think that's a question anybody could answer right now. I think it's a matter of who would be determined to be liable if that were the case.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a bit of experience with smart meters in the U.S., in Canada, and in Europe. And as I mentioned, we did a pilot here.
Yeah.
We had 900 customers, and they loved it. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you one thing for sure. Those customers would surely not want to be told that they couldn't have the benefits of the advanced metering because somebody says, well, we're worried about the possible fire or RF exposure or anything like that. Mm-hmm. That wasn't. We didn't get one complaint about any of those things.
Mm-hmm. For somebody with a solar system, it might be more tempting to just say, let me just opt out and I'll just try and balance my use and.
Well, you could opt out.
And be charged
if an opt-out was possible under the current statute. The DC Council said that Pepco shall replace the existing meters with smart meters. So I sure don't have the authority to allow an opt-out. If something happened that it would, and there is discussion about that in some other states like California and Maine that I'm aware of. Well, there's two things that are going to happen. Number one, whoever opts out, at least what they're being told now, is that they'll have to pay to have someone come around and read their meter because basically the utility will have to maintain two separate meter reading operations. And one of the major cost savings of going to smart metering is being able to use technology to do the metering. And if you have to maintain an old metering system at the same time, that's going to be very expensive. So they're basically saying that those customers will have to pay both an upfront fee and a monthly fee in order to opt out. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is you're also opting out of all the benefits. Mm-hmm. You as a solar generator, if you're generating power during hot days, hot summer afternoons, when it's most valuable, you could be getting something on. If you were on, say, an hourly price, you could be getting 5 times as much, and maybe 10 or 15 times as much in some cases for your power, as long as it's metered hourly, so that we know that you generated it during the hours when that price spike was happening. If you don't have a smart meter, you get the average price for your generation. That's what you'd be giving up. So there is there is a whole lot to lose.
Right.
There's a lot.
There's always trade-offs.
A lot hanging on the there
Yeah.
because there are such huge potential benefits, and I recognize that there are people that are uneasy about it. What I have seen so far has been anecdotal. I haven't seen anything that conclusively demonstrates that there's a problem with fires or RF exposure or anything like that.
Rick, can I
Yeah.
just add to, when you talked about the skyrocketing bills for the advantage of the smart meter, is the meter is going to be a lot more accurate than the current meter. So I think that's a benefit. But when the Office of the People's Council, in conjunction with PEPCO and the Commission, we've been holding smart meter workshops throughout the community. And one thing that we tell people is that your bill may very well go up. But the difference is that it was probably good, like Commissioner Morgan said, it was going to go up anyway, probably, because there's a lot of bills that consumers are going to have to pay for in the next rate case we think is going to be filed sometime in June, because the consumer's going to have to pay for half of the smart meter implementation. The other half, Commissioner Morgan says, paid by federal government through stimulus funds. But there are other bills that are coming along also, to pay for PEPCO's enhanced reliability plan. That's going to cost. So there are a lot of factors. Things aren't going to just be even while the smart meter comes in. Costs are going to continue to increase. So, and then the meter is going to more accurately, record your usage. So the advantage is you get to control your usage, and so your bill most likely wouldn't go up as much as it would have if you didn't have the meter and you weren't changing your behavior, because you're learning about your behavior from the meter.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, a lot of people are clueless about how they're using energy.
Yeah, but energy is going to, the cost is going to increase, the costs are going to increase, and you have the potential to lower your bill, but in many cases your bill's not going to necessarily be lowered, but it's not going to be as high as it
One thing I failed to mention when I talked about the smart metering pilot is that it was not a PEPCO pilot. It was run by a nonprofit organization that included PEPCO, but it also included the Office of the People's Council, the Commission, the DC Consumer Utility Board, which is a nonprofit organization, and the local IBEW, which represents PEPCO's organized workers. We designed this program together, and we chose the meters that we would use for the pilot and the type of rates that would be offered, and it was vetted through a collaborative process with all those organizations together. And I would hope that would give some comfort to people that we really have some good experience with smart metering, and this isn't something that's just coming from our utility. This is something that we're really all in together, and we're working on it together.
Do we get the same meters and a similar rate structure?
Some of those questions haven't been answered. They are not the same meters. In fact, I was a guinea pig for the smart metering pilot, and so I've had a smart meter for a few years. They are now in the process of giving everybody a new smart meter. They took my old one out and gave me a new one because they want everybody to have the same meter. PEPCO chose a different meter. The technology's evolving, and of course they were working on cutting the best deal they could get to buy them in bulk and so on. And they don't want to maintain a lot of different types of meters, which is yet another reason why you don't want to have two whole separate metering systems.
Yeah, but I mean, it sort of undercuts this just a little bit. But anyway.
Paul. Yeah, I want to ask a question about how can we better promote, or how are we currently promoting use of sustainable energy technologies? I mean, it seems to me solar is the right way to go for both commercial businesses here, but also private homes, and yet it's so incredibly expensive capital cost up front, regardless of what you get payback with smart metering. That 99% of families and commercial businesses aren't going to do it at this point in time. And I think the communities which have really promoted solar and in fact enhanced financing of capital investment in solar have really been on the forefront of it. So what are we doing today to encourage that? If I wanted to put solar on my roof, can I afford it? And secondly, I think the other big issue is really the built environment and how we encourage conservation in the built environment. And how are we encouraging green building, green retrofitting, conservation, energy efficiency enhancements, not only privately but also in the school system here for green schools, which we've done a lot of work in other areas. We've not worked here in the district on this.
Well, there are a number of things happening already, and with solar, certainly the renewables portfolio standard is a big piece of that. Our not only is our RPS very aggressive, but in fact the solar carve-out, the portion of the RPS that has to be met by solar, is quite aggressive already, and yet there is a bill now before the council that would increase it further, called the Distributed Generation Amendment Act. And so there is the possibility of having an even stronger incentive for solar, which would help to drive up the price of solar RECs, renewable energy certificates, and require that they come from the district, which is not the case in the current statute. So that's one possibility. There was a grant program to provide financial assistance to DC residents who were interested in putting solar in, and obviously it's an expensive program, and in these times of competition for every spare amount of money, a lot of that funding wound up getting sent elsewhere. There were even some residents who were expecting to get grants who found at the last minute that the money had already been spent on something else, which is very unfortunate. That's one of the difficulties of the DC government, and every state in the country pretty much is having the same kind of problem. So for now, I don't believe there's any grant money. I don't know if anyone from DDOE knows more detail about it. I know that's not your department, Cecily, but
Dan might have known.
yeah, but I think there is hope that program could be reinstated. But for now, I think the solar industry is really banking on this legislation to drive up the price of solar RECs to help provide the incentive to keep the industry growing, and it has been growing. We've made a lot of inroads, but it's a little bit stalled right now. I mentioned a little bit before about what we do with net metering, the fact that, and that's something that we've done at the commission because we can control the rates, and the fact that whereas a lot of states provide net metering credit based on just the energy portion of the bill, we, for small customers, and that includes all residentials and small businesses, up to 100 kilowatts of demand, you get the full retail rate, as if your meter goes backwards. You can charge Pepco the same rate they charge you. And as I mentioned, once we have dynamic pricing in place so we can look at when the power is generated, we'll be able to provide a much more powerful incentive for solar. So those are things that we're doing. I feel like the district is really on the cutting edge on the solar issues. The built environment is something I know less about, but I know that we have a very strong green buildings legislation. It's in the process of being implemented. Some really tough targets for benchmarking of buildings. I think we're starting with public buildings, then moving to private commercial buildings. I see Chris nodding his head. I hope I said it all correctly.
Yeah, finally.
This year's also
Yeah, Jeff, I'm sure.
What did we pass that? We passed that about 5 years ago. That's always
Has it been that long?
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
And now some of the stuff, because this was the big compromise with the Building Industry Association, was to phase it in over a lot
I
of
want to
time.
work in the district on financing. COG is actually holding, as we speak, a energy efficiency forum. They had Nina Albert from DC was there talking about how do you finance things, talking about commercial PACE, which is coming.
Yeah. Did you have a comment on this, Judy? Because I wasn't quite finished.
Just a little bit of information about the built environment.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, there are 5 schools that recently got solar systems with a Walmart grant. And also the Wilson Aquatic Center has a PV system.
Oh, great. I was also going to mention regarding schools, we did have a schools program at DDOE that was funded with ratepayer funds in conjunction with the Alliance to Save Energy, which is a national organization, and their education director lives in the district, and her name's Marilee Harrigan. Some of you might know her. And I know that they are interested in trying to do more. That program came to an end, and it had to do with the change in the funding with the creation of some of the new funds to fund the sustainable energy utility, and some of the old programs basically died in that process. But it may be possible to recreate some of that, and I know there's a lot of interest in it. They did some really exciting stuff getting students from the DC schools to actually do some hands-on work on energy efficiency and renewables and figure out what could be done in their own schools. And learning in the process, part of the idea is that the kids would take the information home and teach their parents, get them to start installing CFLs at home and looking for the Energy Star label on new appliances. And there's just so much potential for working through a school's program and all those facets. So right now I think there's sort of a vacuum there, but it may be possible to get something like that started up again. So.
Can I just do a quick promotion of Saturday?
Oh, right.
The Office of the People's Council is actually putting on a distributed generation workshop at the DC Convention Center from 9:30 to 1. And, it'll be primarily dealing with solar energy, just to start, well, not start, but to help educate the DC community about solar. And we're going to have workshops where people are going to talk about, of course, the strength of the DC solar cooperatives, and the fact that you can also do it on an individual basis, and that you may be able to lease solar through, I guess, the solar gardens. And so those are just some of the things that we're trying to do in the district to make people aware of solar and how to go about going solar and what financing is available. As Commissioner Morgan said, that financing is dried up right now, but to the extent there is any, we're going to have someone from the U.S. Department of Energy there, and of course the District Department of the Environment. Commissioner Morgan will be speaking on some of the opportunities and challenges, and Mr. George Nichols will be there to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities. So those are some of the things we're doing. And I believe, Chris, we sent a flyer via email to the Environmental Network. So I hate that I didn't bring any with me, but if anyone's interested, it is going to be Saturday at the Convention Center.
You should tell people OPC's website address, and then
that's a good idea.
Find it that way.
Now, the solar gardens, that is something that has not yet been codified, right? That hasn't gone through legislative process. That's just an idea floating out there.
Right.
And it's something advocated by the solar co-ops.
Yes.
Virtual net metering. Do we have a virtual net metering policy in the district?
Virtual?
The concept being that and there's some folks like the Interstate Renewable Energy Council promoting the concept that, let's say on a low-income development where everybody in the building's a renter, you can put a solar panel and everybody in the building basically shares ownership of it. So each bill for the low-income resident would show a credit for their portion of the solar. So rather than a single net meter, it's virtual net metering where it's a shared.
Well, I think don't you have to have sub-metering for those customers?
No, I can speak to that, because I wrote the Delaware bill.
Okay.
Well, the Delaware law, I should say. So it is being, the regulations are being finalized for Delaware now. And so that's Pepco company, that is or PHI company, I should say. So, but Pepco folks, you don't have them in DC, but Pepco folks are familiar with the concept.
Colorado has it too.
Yeah, Colorado has it as well. So Yeah, it's very possible for the district to do.
How's it
It's just a matter
working?
of writing regulation, writing the law and then writing regulations.
How's it working in Colorado?
They have a couple projects that are that's going well.
Is it pretty new? It's
Pretty new,
yeah.
it's pretty new. This is a new concept. Then there are some issues to resolve on any new policy like this. So, but it is, it's going to go in. But it is a good opportunity for a place like the district where not everybody can have solar or everything. And Rick, I had a question for kind of combining the smart meters and financing. I think a lot about smart metering is going to be smart regulation because there's a lot of opportunity. I think the regulators will help give the most benefit out of these smart meters. So one of them is like software, as mentioned, is having capability for things in the future that you may want to do, like on-bill financing. Is that something that you're supportive of, at least reserving the opportunity to do that in the future?
I certainly want to keep options open. On-bill financing is a controversial issue, and it's it's something that the banks don't like and the utilities don't like. So it's a challenging thing to make it happen. It would probably require some kind of legislation.
But as far as when you develop software,
that's something that could happen irrespective of what kind of meter you have. That's not.
Yeah, but the software is software costs are a lot of the arguments.
Well, that's
why
true. With advanced metering, your software is probably going to be more complex.
And you're developing it now, and so that's why I'm saying that it's those options. I think it is important to kind of reserve those options in the future, so that the utility can't come back and say, "Oh, that's going to cost $1 million to even redo our software."
That's more of an issue about software development than the actual meter itself, which is more of a hardware type issue. So as I understand it, the meters that Pepco is installing don't have a huge amount of intelligence in them, which leaves a lot of flexibility for making changes as the technology improves. You're not stuck with a particular type of hardware that locks you into anything. So at least that's the way they described it in their application. So I would think that kind of thing certainly would be possible if it becomes if there's a decision made that that's an appropriate policy to pursue.
Yes, Chris.
So I live in an old house in Tacoma, D.C. My father and stepmom live a few houses away in another old house, a big old Victorian built before 1910. And a lot of the houses in Tacoma, D.C., which is a historic district, are old. And I got one of the initial smart meters. In fact, I had on the house when I bought it some kind of a earlier version of a smart meter. It was a tiered meter, so I had tiered rates. And when Pepco took out that meter and put in the new, I guess, experimental smart meter, I noticed that my bill went up. At least I felt it did. So I complained and got a new meter. And you helped me, Commissioner Morgan, at that one meeting of the Office of the People's Counsel. But I still have to go back and analyze all my bills and try to figure out what the benefits are versus the non-benefits. But in researching all of this, I started finding all these websites, mainly from California and some from Maine, where people are really going berserk complaining about smart meters. And their complaints are not all illegitimate. I mean, there are many, many concerns about fires and the EMF pulse. And I brought some handouts if anyone wants. There's a report that might have been prepared by PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, but it's called Wireless Smart Meters and Potential for Electric Fires. And the issue is that our electrical wiring is built, and a lot of it's old, it's built for a certain kind of wiring, a certain kind of electricity to go through it, not for high-frequency harmonic bursts. And these meters will generate them probably every, 15 to 45 seconds. So you're talking about 3,000 to, I don't know, 15,000 bursts of energy in a 24-hour period. And that's what these scientists and other people are talking about. There are smart meters.
Chris, can I just ask, are you talking about bursts of radio transmission, or are you talking about bursts in the electrical wires?
Yeah. So, for example, it says harmonics are high frequencies, or higher frequencies than 60 hertz that carry more energy and ride along on the electrical wiring in bursts. These may be contributing to electrical fires where there is a weak spot: older wiring, undersized neutrals for the electrical load, poor grounding, use of aluminum conductors, etc. The use of smart meters will place an entirely new and significantly increased burden on existing electrical wiring because of the very short, very high-intensity wireless emissions, radio frequency bursts that the meters produce to signal the utility about energy use. Now, in some countries, I think in Italy, and I think even in the U.S. in some jurisdictions, they're using fiber optic or cable. I didn't have enough time to research it, but there are smart meters that aren't wireless, and I want to have a smart meter and have all the benefits, but I don't want my house to burn down, and I don't know if 15,000 EMF bursts a night, or 3,000 a night are going to damage my health or not. I'm not trying to be a pessimistic person, but on the other hand, it's a new technology, and if in California enough concern has been raised to the point that I think PG&E just in the last 2 weeks has said customers can opt out if they pay extra. Maybe, in my case, I know there's old wiring in the walls, very old wiring. I don't want to have a fire. So I'm not against smart meters, I'm just saying, I'm not making this up. The people in California, and I think some in Maine, are really upset. So.
Well, I've seen some of this material. You've sent me some things, and I've seen it in other places as well. As a policymaker, it's hard to know how to respond to something like that hasn't been demonstrated with a peer-reviewed scientific study. There are claims out there about people who have started getting headaches as soon as their smart meter was installed. And there was one utility that they actually worked with this woman and said, okay, we'd like to try to find out why this is happening. So they tried turning her meter on and off, and they asked her when she was having the headaches. Turned out the headaches were happening when the meter was off. And there are other instances like that. There are things that happen. There are fires in people's homes, and if you just had a smart meter installed, you might have reason to suspect that the meter had something to do with it. But you might have had a fire with the old meter, or maybe it had nothing to do with the meter. I guess as a policymaker, my response is to say, well, with regard to radio frequency, that's the Federal Communications Commission that's responsible for it. PEPCO is required to meet certain standards for its smart meters with respect to the radio signals. They had to meet that in order to get the federal grant. So there's some pretty strict requirements on them, and we certainly don't have the expertise to look into all these different kind of allegations. I'm not aware of any of them in the district. That doesn't mean that there aren't real ones out there. What I do know is there are tremendous benefits to be had by moving to this new technology. I think it's high time that we replace the more than 100-year-old metering technology that we've been using because of all the benefits that we have, not the least of which are the environmental benefits where we can, by using these meters, be able to cut our usage at times when those power plants are belching out smoke from emissions from coal. And if we can do that, let's try to take advantage of that. if problems come up, obviously they're, whoever is responsible for them, if they somehow fail to acknowledge some kind of problem, there are ways to deal with that. But there are not like enormous problems everywhere these meters are going in, and it's not just California; they're going in lots and lots of places. As for yes, it is possible to do it without radio signals with fiber optics. Our system is not that. Our system depends on radio signals. That's the most cost-effective way to do it, and that's Pepco has already ordered all the equipment, including all the meters with the chips for that type of communication, and whatever concerns people may have. I mean, the fact is the decision was made not this year, not last year, but in 2009 by the DC Council to go ahead with the deployment of advanced metering infrastructure throughout the district. So if problems come up, obviously we'll have to deal with them. But I guess my own feeling is that the benefits are so enormous and the problems are not documented to the point where I think we can really get our arms around them and do anything about it. Some people say let's have a moratorium until they're proven safe. Well, one thing is scientifically you can never prove anything is safe because there's always a shadow of a doubt, and we'll never get there if we go that route. So that's
how long have we been questioning like the cell phones? I mean, it's still with all the studies.
Yeah.
There's still no definitive word on that. So I would say with smart meters that would probably be longer than that.
Well, putting a cell phone next to your head, you're talking hundreds of times the amount of radio frequency exposure than you would get from a smart meter, let alone the fact that it's only operating less than 1% of the
But
time.
that's a complicated comparison. I mean, first of all, I think there's a new book by one of the original researchers hired by the cell phone industry, and he's come out and said, hold on, they misrepresented everything I did, and it's not safe. The New York Times just had an article in their Sunday magazine. I didn't read it all, but I think they even acknowledged there might be some problem. But it's not, I'm not arguing the EMF, I'm arguing, I have old wiring, super old wiring. And I don't know how many of that, how far along is Pepco in installing the smart meters? It's just beginning, I think.
Well, I don't believe they're halfway yet.
They're supposed to be, I think it's supposed to be complete by the end of the year, by December 2011. I think they're all supposed to be installed.
They're researching my request to opt out, and their argument is what you said, that the law doesn't provide for an opt-out, but I feel unsafe from a wiring point of view. And when you read these reports from California, they're not, I mean, yes, they're anecdotal, but they're in the news. I mean, they're like, well,
Those things always make news. I mean, they make great news.
A bunch of smart meters were just put in and the apartment building burned down. I mean, it's...
Well, we need more than that.
Yeah.
I didn't jump into this issue because I wanted to. I genuinely believe that there's enough concern in California that they've finally said, all right, opt out if you don't want it.
Well, let's continue to share information on that. We're running out of time. We only have about 7 more minutes. And I wanted to do 2 things, maybe get 1 or 2 more questions. But I think we had a good back and forth, and we kind of shared where we're at on that. And I know your staff will continue to look at some of the stuff that Chris shared with you.
Right.
And keep me informed so I can disseminate information out to folks that attended this meeting too. But it's important. And, and from an environmental standpoint, we believe in the precautionary principle. But God, it's overwhelming how many places we might want to apply that. It's just like we have to pick and choose which ones are.
Give up your cell phone first.
Yeah. I mean, I know that this phone is worse, has more radiation coming out of it than that phone. I never put this up to my ear. but I try not to put it up to my ear. I don't. But anyway, it's so thanks you guys for bringing that up. That's important. I didn't even know about that until this meeting. Let's just keep looking at it. Any other comments or questions on other issues? And are there any? I mean, we've had some announcements for events and such.
I would like to just at least give out OPC's website, because we do have, since I didn't bring flyers, there are information on this on OPC's website, the Distributed Generation Workshop. It's www.opc-dc.gov. And it's this Saturday, the convention.
And it's right on your main page, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Quick things if you want. One, out in Santa Clara, California, there was an effort made to do a cooperative, large-scale cooperative purchase of solar, and we're trying to duplicate that here in D.C. So working with EPA, we have at this point 13 agencies signed up, 150 different sites, and about 35 megawatts of solar across a whole range of different players. And the notion being, if we can bundle the demand into one procurement, we'd attract a different market player and maybe get a better price on the overall package. So that's one interesting.
Aren't these the kind of things SE is also supposed to be doing at some point? Yeah.
We will.